It began like any other talk show, warm smiles, laughter, and the promise of open conversation. But behind the smiles, tension was brewing. And before the cameras even stopped rolling, one of television's most recognizable guests had already decided she was done. Welcome to Story Vault, where the spotlight fades, but the truth still burns bright. That afternoon, the Loose Women studio in London was alive with its usual buzz. Producers moved swiftly across the floor, final checks were being made, and the audience, packed and ready, waited for another lively debate between familiar hosts. But this wasn't just another day. This was the day Meghan Markle walked onto the Loose Women set. It was meant to be a friendly interview, light, engaging, perhaps even redemptive. Her team had framed it as a chance to connect with British audiences again, to show warmth, to soften the edges of all the royal controversy that had followed her across continents. The producers were thrilled. Ratings would soar. But among the panel sat Denise Welch, outspoken, confident, never afraid to ask what others won't. From the very beginning, there was an energy between the two, not open hostility, but an unmistakable charge in the air. Denise leaned back in her chair as Meghan was introduced, her expression polite but unreadable. The cameras rolled. "Welcome to the show, Meghan," said host Charlene White. "It's lovely to have you here." "Thank you," Meghan smiled. "It's lovely to be here." The applause faded, and for a few moments, everything was smooth. Meghan spoke about charity work, her new projects, and her advocacy for women's empowerment. The audience nodded along. But television, especially Loose Women, thrives on tension, and Denise Welch knew how to find it. "So, Meghan," Denise said lightly, "you've often spoken about the British press and how it treated you unfairly. But some might say you've made a career out of talking about those experiences. Do you ever worry people are tired of hearing it?" There was a pause. A silence just long enough for everyone to feel it. Meghan smiled tightly. "I think people are more tired of the misinformation than my truth," she replied. "When something's said about you for years, it's important to correct it." Denise nodded, unfazed. "But isn't there a difference between correcting a lie and reliving it? Sometimes when we keep revisiting the same pain, we give it new life." The studio grew quiet. Even the audience seemed unsure whether to applaud or hold their breath. Meghan's tone cooled. "I think healing looks different for everyone," she said carefully. "And for me, speaking up is part of that process." Denise leaned forward slightly. "Of course," she said. "But do you think speaking up means forgiving, or does it mean fighting back?" The question hung heavy in the air. Meghan's eyes flickered, just for a second. "I think it means standing in your truth," she said. "And I'll never apologize for that." The panel shifted awkwardly. Charlene tried to change the subject, but it was too late, the spark had been lit. As the segment went on, Denise pressed again. She mentioned the royal family, the Netflix series, and the interviews that had divided the public. And then came the question that changed the mood entirely. "Meghan, do you ever regret leaving the royal family the way you did?" Meghan blinked. "I don't regret choosing peace," she said, her voice sharper now. "What I regret is trusting the wrong people." Denise didn't look away. And who were those wrong people? That was it. That was the moment the air left the room. Meghan's smile disappeared completely. "I think that's an inappropriate question," she said. "I'm not here to discuss private matters." "But you've discussed them before," Denise replied calmly. "So, surely, the public deserves clarity?" Meghan looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't owe anyone anything," she said quietly. The audience murmured. A ripple of unease swept across the studio. Charlene stepped in quickly. "All right, let's take a short break." But Meghan wasn't done. She turned toward Denise. "You know," she said, voice low, "women tearing down other women is exactly what I've spent my life trying to stop." Denise sat back, eyes steady. "I'm not tearing anyone down," she replied. "I'm asking what everyone's thinking." That was when Meghan stood up. The crowd gasped. The crew froze. She removed her microphone and set it on the table, her face calm but her voice trembling slightly. "I think we're done here," she said. "I came here for a conversation, not confrontation." Charlene tried to speak, "Meghan, please," but it was too late. Meghan Markle turned, walked off the set, and disappeared behind the curtain. The audience sat in stunned silence. Denise looked down, exhaled slowly, then looked toward the producers. "Was it something I said?" she murmured, half under her breath. The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within minutes, the internet lit up like wildfire. Clips from the live broadcast spread across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hashtag Meghan Markle storms off trended within the hour. Some viewers applauded her for standing her ground. Others accused her of being unable to handle real questions. And Denise Welch, suddenly, unintentionally, found herself at the center of an international storm. By evening, news outlets had picked it up. Explosive on-air clash between Meghan Markle and Denise Welch. Loose women segment ends in chaos. Royal exit, Meghan walks out mid-interview. Each headline bolder than the last. Behind the scenes, the production team scrambled. Officially, ITV released a calm statement. Today's conversation became emotionally charged. Meghan decided to leave the set early. "We respect her decision and wish her well." But unofficially, sources described it as a meltdown, a standoff, a PR nightmare. Denise, for her part, remained composed. On social media, she simply posted, "Sometimes, asking the real question costs you. I'm okay with that." The post went viral. Days later, Meghan's team released a brief message of their own. The Duchess appreciates the platform to discuss her work, but felt the conversation no longer reflected the purpose of her appearance. It was polished, controlled, deliberate. But the silence that followed said more than the words ever could. For fans who admired her, it was proof that she refused to be disrespected. For critics, it confirmed everything they'd always said, that she couldn't take criticism. And yet, beneath the noise, there was something undeniably human about it all. A woman who had been scrutinized for years finally meeting another woman unafraid to question her. It wasn't villain versus victim, it was two strong personalities colliding on live television. And maybe that's why the world couldn't stop watching. Behind the glossy headlines and social media drama, there was a truth few wanted to admit. Both Meghan and Denise had said what many think but never say. Denise had challenged what fame and truth mean in the modern age. Meghan had reminded the world what happens when you push someone too far. The clip replayed millions of times. Each pause, each glare, each carefully chosen word became a symbol of something bigger. Commentators called it the interview that defined celebrity accountability. But for Story Vault, it was something deeper, the moment when a conversation became a confrontation, and honesty turned into fire. A week later, Denise spoke briefly about it on air. She didn't apologize. She didn't gloat. She simply said, "Sometimes conversations aren't meant to end softly." And in that moment, even those who disagreed respected her courage. Meghan, meanwhile, stayed quiet. Her next public appearance was at a charity event in California. Smiling. Polished. Radiant. But if you looked closely, just for a second, you could see the weight behind her eyes. Because no matter how much control you try to keep, moments like that never really fade. They linger. They echo. And somewhere in that studio, long after the cameras stopped rolling, the echoes of that argument still seem to hang in the air. The truth is, neither woman was wrong, they were simply standing on different sides of the same wall. One fighting for expression, the other for accountability. And somewhere between those two truths,